Students of Reddit, what was the reason for why one of your teachers had a breakdown during class? I have a story for this one. A few years ago, I took a class in design theory. It was the pet project of the head of the college, and taught the design principles behind everything from common household objects to room layouts to entire organizations. It was an absolutely brutal class, but uniquely informative. One day, towards the end of the semester, we went over the use of humor in design. The professor spent the entire class talking about how laughter and amusement can be used to engage an audience and change how people see a situation. The whole time, he was laughing, cracking jokes, and good ones, too, and generally making sure the class had a good time. And at the end of the lesson, he told us not to underestimate the power of laughter. After all, it was how he had gotten through the lecture that day. His father had died a couple days prior. He broke down crying after he told us. It's probably the most impactful lecture I've ever attended. The teacher was bullied and disrespected every day. One day an idiot threw a geometry compass and it got stuck on a cork board, like when you do knife throwing, right beside her while she was writing on the board. Instant meltdown, in tears, she left the class and I never saw her again. Can't blame her, she probably thought her life was in danger at this point. Some schools, neighborhoods are very hard. Grade 10 science class, we were taking turns using some kind of lung capacity measuring device. Breathe into a tube and a small plastic ball gets raised by the force of your breathing. Something gets measured somehow, I can't really remember details aside from the plastic ball. Anyway, the teacher takes his turn, apparently trying to show off with how hard he can breathe out, somehow breaks the measuring device. The teacher goes into a rage after realizing he broke it, briefly tries to fix it, gives up, picks up a metal garbage can and throws it in anger, storms out of the room and doesn't come back for 10 to 15 minutes, at which point he returns and acts like nothing happened. It was more bizarre and amusing than anything else. The teacher learned that one student cheated on a history essay. After getting this kid suspended for 2 days, repeat offender, she discovered that almost 2/3 RDS of her class in that subject was cheating as well. I don't know what happened after that, but she literally broke down when she found out that my class knew about it. We were in a different subject, so we weren't a part of this scandal. This teacher always seemed tough as nails, so it was a shock when a kid just said she looked like a pit bull, she did have jowls, and she left crying. She was a substitute teacher at elementary school, and at some point a kid took it too far and threw a bottle at her. It was an empty plastic bottle, but still. Poor teacher. Poor teacher hit and killed a student walking on their way to school. My favorite science teacher in high school was slowly being forced out by administration. One day in class she stopped teaching and sat down in front of us and told us she had just been diagnosed with MS and began sobbing. The entire class got up and gave her a long group hug. It is one of my most cherished memories from that chapter of my life. We made our English teacher cry. But we didn't want to, because we really liked her. She was about to switch to another school and she had some really important things to do. She needed to call someone, so she gave us a task to do and left the room for like 5 minutes. We were a horrible class, around 16/17 at this time, mainly boys. We had breakfast together that day and stuff was still in the classroom. So the boys decided it was time to throw it around and hit the window with stick of butter. While one boy tried to clean the window, using a squeegee, is that the right word? Never used it before and I'm not native, someone else decided to throw out the trash. Another teacher came, because she saw the trash flying by the window of her classroom, and in the moment she stared yelling at us, the other teacher came back. She immediately started crying as she saw what was going on. I think she was angry, and overwhelmed because she liked the school and didn't want to leave, but in this moment we were the little butts making the decision easier. But the next week, she came into the class and had written a small poem for us, about being too old to throw around trash and playing with butter. My math teacher in 8th grade was extremely pregnant and our exchange student from Brazil called her beautiful. She broke down in tears and admitted she didn't feel very pretty. Physics teacher came into class late. Walked past the podium and walked into the chalkboard. Like, he would have kept walking if it wasn't there. He then picked up one of those plastic pen things that you put chalk in. Proceeded to try and write on the chalkboard even though the pen was empty of chalk. All the while mumbling incoherently. Found out later he had a stroke and managed to drive himself to the university. Edit, he didn't return to teaching that year, and as best I recall he ended up retiring due to health complications. He was in his 60s and along with the stroke he had fallen and hit his head. Online searching shows he passed away about 8 years later. My 8th grade Spanish teacher and the freshman baseball coach were having an affair. It eventually became public knowledge and she had several breakdowns as her divorce played out over course of my 8th grade year. I had the pleasure of joining the freshman baseball team the next year and experiencing his own share of breakdowns from his own divorce. My university physics professor got the call that his dog had died right before a test. Needless to say, we didn't have a test that day. There was this science teacher already on the verge of a breakdown. We called her Molecule. Someone wrote that on a leaf of one of the plants in the class and she started crying and pretty much had a breakdown. One time in math class the emo girl was not having it. I don't even remember how it got started, but she ended up bickering with the teacher and the emo girl called the teacher Thunder Tits. It was at this point that the emo girl was sent to the office and the teacher had to take a seat at her desk in the back for a few minutes. My JH biology teacher legit used to have weird butt flashbacks of when he fought at Vietnam. Garbage was pretty sad to see. The one that sticks out is my history teacher, who was a level 10 incompetent at anything. She usually blathered on through class, about stupid things. She was always very well put together, dressed well, hair done, it's just there was no substance to her teaching or conversational topics. One day, she started talking about a coworker she was very close to when she was young. Mind you, she had to be approaching her 60s. The story started out innocent enough where we were all basically ignoring her, and pretty soon it veered off into this terrible reality. Her coworker had gone home from work, and died in a car accident on the way home. This had to have been 30 years ago. She was crying, saying how much she missed her, and how crazy life can be. The way she explained the story was so sad, too. They had made plans the following day, and my teacher was excitedly waiting for that coworker to come in. I disliked that teacher immensely, but I felt so sorry for her. She stood there, crying because her friend was gone. I don't think at 15 I could imagine that sort of loneliness, or pain. But now, a good 15 years later, I've had her experiences, and I sympathize with her. My history government teacher has been to Vietnam and it's quite known that he was on the front lines. So in the middle of a lecture a girl raised her hand and asked, "Have you ever killed someone?" The question caused him to go silent and leave the room for quite a while. Luckily the girl was ripped a new butt by her fellow classmates. My best friend caused the school librarian to lose it because she thought she caught him masturbating in the non-fiction section. For clarification, the librarian accused my friend of masturbating in said section of the school library. He has denied all allegations and refuses to answer any more questions on the matter. Not my teacher but my younger sisters at the time. The class was making fun of her recent miscarriage and her mum dying of cancer. Yes, teenagers are cruel. My math professor in college was going through a divorce and they were fighting for custody of their 2 younger children. You can tell he was irritated because he wore his emotions on his sleeve. One day he came into class about 5 minutes late and he was physically shaking. He was violently crying and apologized to us and said the class was cancelled. He apparently lost the custody fight with his ex-wife. A flufftard said he'd piss on the teacher's grandpa's grave. He died 2 days earlier. Reading through these comments, I will never understand how some kids can be such pricks. He was showing us a diagram of a baby in the womb when it started off as an egg and the diagram was spinning around and we kept asking if the baby spins out for 9 months and does it get dizzy, etc. He headbutted a locker lol. This one cool guy, let's call him Davy, tormented our English teacher for no reason. She was very sweet and passionate about her job, but this guy was a slong. He would write things on the board before class really small in random spots like witch, pig and just other random insults. The one day that caused the breakdown was when he stole the remote for the wall-mounted TV. Her class was the time period that had the daily announcements, so the TV was heavily used. So she searched for the remote, couldn't find it and had to stand on her tiptoes to control the TV from the button on the front. A little bit through the announcements the TV turns off. Everyone's reaction was weird, so teacher got back up to turn the TV on again. A minute or so later went off again. Of course at that point it starts getting suspicious and she jokes, "Okay, is someone playing a prank on me?" No one says anything because no one knew Davy had the remote. He repeats turning it off 2 more times directly after she turned it back on and she snapped. "Okay, who has the remote, who is doing this?" And being immature 9th graders we all start snickering cause that garbage is funny. After no one fessed up she starts unloading about how she been having a tough time lately and starts spewing out all this information about her personal life, just ranting away. And during the middle of her rant Davy turns the TV on and starts flipping through the channels. The teacher lets out an animalistic yell and burst into tears. Cue entire class with shocked Pikachu face. She throws the classroom door open and runs out. She was gone for like 20 minutes and returns with the JROTC teacher. Literal hard as steel drill sergeant. He was calmly talking to us how what we were doing as a class was garbage tea to her and the perp needs to step forward, and fluffing Davy had the balls to turn the TV off and on. Dead silence. You could have heard dust falling on the ground and everyone was like, "We're dead." At this point someone who knew he took it quietly pointed at Davy. The drill instructor goes over to him and literally pulls him up out of his desk by his shirt collar and screams in his face, "Do you have the fluffing remote?" Feet dangling off of the ground, his whole arm was shaking as he took the remote out of his pocket and showed it. His butt was grass now. He was swiftly removed from the class by the drill instructor and teacher while we all sat there for the rest of the class doing nothing until the bell rang. And #X200B, edit, my first silver. Thank you, Ziranonia, less than 3.